As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. Jen, episode 31. Can you believe it?
31. No, not really.
31. I just heard like threes are really lucky numbers, right? Have you heard that?
I have heard that before.
Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking of that on my way. I was driving home from work to come home to do the recording, and I'm like, what is the significance of 31? And it's so funny. I'm always like kind of thinking in that way, but I couldn't come up with it. But you saying that 30s are lucky, we'll go with that. That sounds great.
We're just gonna roll with that. I mean, maybe the luck of episode 31 is about you telling us about meeting Keanu Reeves. I need to know. Tell me everything.
Oh my gosh. So it's so wild that this particular episode is on authenticity, because having an opportunity to meet Keanu Reeves a couple weeks ago, there was not another person on planet that I've ever met that is quite as authentic as this guy. So I have a friend who is neighbors with the lead singer of the group Dogstar. So if you're familiar with the group Dogstar, it's a rock band that Keanu Reeves is a bass player of.
Amazing.
And a couple weeks ago, they came and played at here, little Jacksonville, Oregon. Dogstar played. My friend invited me to go as her guest, and we got backstage passes and got to meet Mr. Keanu Reeves and got to take some pictures with the band. But it was a surreal moment. It was truly a surreal moment where I felt like, I was able to really thank him for what he does in the world. And that was cool, right? Like to actually be able to communicate to somebody who you really admire.
Yes.
It's been about 4 years now since COVID that I've always been somewhat of a fan. You got Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and you've got Point Break, and you've got Matrix and Speed and all of these things. But about 4 years ago during COVID, there was a book that came out called What Would Keanu Do? Have you ever heard of that book?
No, but now I'm going to read it.
Yeah, so a book that came out called What Would Keanu Do? And then there ended up being like all these memes online and all of that. And that's when I really started to become more of a fan of his.
Yeah.
Just the actor was like, here is this person who really represents himself, very, very true to himself. And so it was, so cool to see that all come around and have an opportunity to shake his hand a couple weeks ago. So wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, did he have a response when you said, thank you so much, or you're my inspiration, or whatever words you chose? Did he say anything back?
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was a brief conversation. I actually first wished him happy birthday because he turned 60 just a couple days before we went and saw the show. Yeah, Keanu Reeves is 60 years old.
He looks good.
I know he does. So I wished him happy birthday. I told him I also had a milestone birthday this year. He asked me about my birthday. He said, happy birthday to you. Yes. And then I said, thanked him for, all he does. And he's like, oh, or how did he say? He's like, it's such an honor, and I'm thankful for, everyone and all that they do. Or I don't know. He kind of does what he does and kind of put it right back in like this very humble way. And that's exactly what you get, when we saw him in concert, was a very, very humble, down to earth, human who, I think will tell you like it is too, I guess, and talking with Brett, who's the lead singer of Dogstar, and getting to know him a little bit, because we spent about an hour backstage, at this concert, and got to talk old memories. We went with my friend and her mother, who, they lived across the street from this guy when he was a kid. And so that was so funny, just hearing all these kids of them when they were kids. Anyway, what they had said about Keanu is like, you get what you get. Like if he is not, not having, the best of the day, he's going to be very honest about it. And that I think too takes a lot of just courage of just allowing his true freak flag to fly of whatever it is,
All right, I'm going to cut that right there. True freak flag to fly. That right there is like a quotable moment already. And we haven't even started.
Moment as we talk about authenticity and freak flags.
Yeah. What a cool experience.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. How is your week going? How's everything going for you this week?
Well, I am down in Telluride, which is amazing. I love coming down here. I love all the people I get to work with down here. Similarly to you, although this man is not famous, I had a meeting yesterday. I went out to a 3-hour lunch with a gentleman who runs a boutique health insurance company, and he was just put on the board of Delta Dental. Do you have Delta Dental in Oregon? Because they're nationwide.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So he's been in the HR space and the benefits space for a long time. I showed up as who I am. I have never felt such an instantaneous human connection with a man in my entire life. And not in like this sexual way, but it was like, man, I am being me and he respects me. He appreciates me. He's asking really interesting questions. And we had this 3-hour lunch of just authentic connection. And it meant the world to me, and I haven't stopped talking about it. So I'm on cloud 9.
That's awesome.
Really, I mean, as a coach, I know to do the thought work, but I spent time with somebody who was just like this shining light, and it helped my light shine brighter than it has in a while. And I can feel it. And I know people that I did a workshop today down here, and people could feel it. You know, when people come up to you after you've done a presentation, they're like, thank you so much. I'm going to call you. That was really amazing. I wrote down all your contact information. This was incredible. And it's like, I did a good job today. I shined my light today.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And he really inspired me to just keep shining my light and being me. And all I could do was think about episode 31 about authentic leadership and owning your style. I was like, I can't wait to get on the podcast. Because we talk a lot about who we surround ourselves with matters. And I haven't had an experience like that where all of a sudden my light was just like, it matters, you know?
I do.
Okay. I know you do. I know you do. But yeah, I have that with you. I've had that with certain women in my life. I don't know if I've ever had it to this extent with a platonic male partner countertop. I don't know. It was wild. It was wild. So anyway, so I'm just having a ball. I'm having a great week.
Just glowing. I love it, Kathy. You are truly glowing.
I'm having a great time. I really am. But, you know, Jen, let's just dive in. I mean, when you think about authentic leadership and owning your style, what does that mean to you? What does that mean for you?
Oh my gosh, this is going to get a little woo-woo.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's woo.
And I'm just going for it. I'm letting that freak flag fly today. But, you know, I, without a shred of doubt, believe that every single human being at our deep core, we know who we are.
Ooh.
Right? There's a knowing of who that authentic self is. And yet, you know, the truth of who that is ends up being clouded over. Based on the programming of, you know, how we were raised and, you know, what then became, you know, part of patterning or expectations from others and people pleasing and all of these things. But the truth of who you are, the truth of who I am, we know. And so, you know, the authenticity of, you know, what it truly means to be a leader and owning what it truly means to be a leader is the shedding and the uncovering of what that truth is without any without any like apologies, without any, trying to glass over or, trying to shadow over any of the deficiencies and the weak spots, is owning the truth of the things that we're not always on top of or that we don't always get right. Right. I think there's a lot of, and that when it comes to like the truest authentic selves to be, the leaders that we want to be, it's finding our way through that, right? And then giving permission to others to do the same. So, it's such a big question, but I think for me, it really came down to the truth within us all. And it's so simple and it's so easy, but yet that's the only question that not a single other person outside of ourselves could ever even come close to answering.
Amen. Amen. Up and down. Praise the Lord. And I don't even know what to say to that. That was brilliant. It's just like we know it and we just have to tap in, figure out, because how we tap in to figure out who we are authentically. Mm-hmm. I think it's just been covered up by like what you were saying, just years of narratives that we've chosen and external information that we've taken in and turned into our truth. Man, I mean, what you just shared is everything.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought too when I'm coming into this episode. I'm like, is there anything more that's everything to our being than our authenticity?
Yeah.
Right. And so, we'll get into more today. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Of what it actually means and how we go about the process. But, at the end of the day, really defining it and calling it out is authenticity is truth. Right. And so but the truth is something that can never be defined externally. The truth is, finding that path on an individual level. And that's an uncomfortable and for many people a scary journey to take because it requires shedding of things that we may be holding on to for a long, long time.
Oh yeah. It's that unlearning and that shedding. You can't make this stuff up. I coached a client today, this afternoon. We started coaching 3 hours ago, almost to the dot. And she's in my HR 2.0 program, which is all about like, what do you want to do after HR? And we put a plan together and she started sharing with me. She hadn't thought about this in a really long time. But when I think she said she was 12, she drew stick figures of what she wanted to be. And it was a translator and it was a teacher. And here she was, like she had all these careers before going into HR. She's been in HR and she's like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. There's elements of HR I love, but HR is not for me. So we've kind of been unraveling her authentic self. And man, I mean, the emotion in her face when she was sharing that with me today, I was like, there's her truth right there.
What a beautiful moment that is.
For her to invite me in and share that with me, we've got to take the time to figure out who we are authentically, or we will forever feel like we're in some kind of a straitjacket, I think. And you and I have both done the work, but let's, I want to kind of go on to our next question. Have you always led authentically? Let's just start there. Have you always been authentic, Jen, in the workplace, in HR? Love that yes, no question.
What's that?
We always try to avoid yes, no questions. I was like, there's a straight up yes, no question, but something tells me you're going to elaborate.
I think there's a part of every one of us who is always trying to grasp towards wanting to be authentic, right? It's such a like part of like, I think the human a human desire. We all want to be accepted and appreciated and valued for who we are. And yet, when we really start to evaluate some of these underlying truths, we come to find out, well, wait a minute, who are we doing it for? Like what is it really serving? And so I think for me, that's where I go back years and years and years, especially with, my drinking and, numbing and, the things that I would do that really were a part of kind of this facade or this chameleon that, you see, but really who is just really struggling on the inside. And so, I think, and we've talked about this before, there's a part of the HR role that is always going to have a shadow, or that's always going to have, a curtain in terms of like what can and can't be disclosed. But at the same time, I was finding myself in such a place where I wasn't really releasing anywhere. And instead I was just kind of finding ways to numb and to check out. And that's really, I think, in terms of authenticity, then, the more that we're not really being kind of true to ourselves around what might really be going on. And if we're bottling it up and we're pushing it away and we're doing these other things with it, now it's even that much harder to like have that true authentic, self come out. We're just like, it's almost like we're kind of digging our own grave in a way. And that's, absolutely how I felt so many times, through the course of my career, where I just was going through the motions and feeling like I was doing it for everybody else and not really fully aligned with what really mattered to me. And so, yeah, I could give like so many examples, but I think just really kind of simplifying it to, the behaviors that I engaged in, because I was really afraid of what the truth what others' experience of what my truth was. And, having had experiences in my past where that truth expression, of what our authentic truth is can be rejected or, pushed back upon, in pretty dramatic ways. I think there's a lot of understanding to our fear, right? We can have a lot of compassion around our fear sometimes to really let loose and let go of all of that. And so it's, really kind of the process of understanding the what and the why. So then we can start to really break down how we can change the patterns. So how about you? Like, can you remember in your past where you didn't feel like you were, really showing up authentically as your most authentic self?
First of all, what you just shared, per usual. Now I'm like, yep, I just can relate, especially the part of escaping through alcohol. When you just open the door to that one and talk about inauthenticity, not even seeing it, like such a mask that alcohol can be for some people, not everybody, but I used alcohol to escape. And what's coming to my mind was when I spent 12 years at a particular organization, and 2007, 2008, Great Recession, I laid off 110 people. 110 people.
That's hard. Heartbreaking.
My inauthentic self showed up for 110 different conversations because I was operating from, I don't want to get sued. I was operating from fear. I thought they were going to hate me. I thought my head was on the chopping block, just totally coming from fear. And granted, it was 2007, 2008. It was a very, very difficult time. No sugarcoating that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of having just showing up in a very approachable, authentic, kind and loving way, I was pretty robotic with the way I showed up at those terminations.
Yeah.
And the handing of the paper, like going through the steps that the lawyer would map out for me, as opposed to saying, you know what? I am quite literally experiencing perhaps one of the lowest times of this person's life with them. And I just didn't show up as myself. I put on this armor that we talk a lot about in the podcast that didn't feel true for me, which would lead to me walking 2 blocks to the Hotel Jerome in Aspen and drinking after work.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever would come with me, and boy, did we have some peeps at that time, right? I mean, how old am I now? I can't even remember. I can't even remember what age I was. Maybe I was too old to be going to bars and drinking after work, but I was in my 30s, let's say, right? Somewhere in there, early 30s. And I did that to escape because I was so uncomfortable with the way I was showing up in terminations. I show up completely differently now when I'm having really, really difficult conversations, including mediations. I just show up as my authentic, truly loving self. And it's not like I'm showing up trying to make them wrong for feeling bad about the termination or being sad or being angry or pissed. I just show up as myself and I just listen. So for me, it's just night and day from how I used to show up. And not just in 2007 and 2008. I was just like, if you can imagine a ball rolling down the hill and picking up speed, that was me from the time I was 21 until the time I kind of hit rock bottom. I mean, I was just anxious and more anxious and more anxious and more inauthentic because that's what I thought an HR person was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I just decided at 45, I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to show up in HR that way. And I just lead completely differently now. And people, therefore, because I'm showing up differently, I have much deeper conversations and meaningful conversations, whether we're celebrating something or we're going through something really difficult together. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just kind of came up for me. But boy, the masking with the alcohol, I was a pro. Yeah.
I can relate big time and into my 30s and 40s. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was 48 when I stopped drinking. So, yeah, well into my 40s. I'm so with you on that. So with you on that. What about what you first opened with, that articulation of knowing yourself, like truly knowing yourself and trusting that. How does that understanding, now that you have that, how does that really contribute to building trust and strong team culturally in an organization? In other words, like your own unique leadership style is because of your own unique authenticity. So how does that new understanding, that authenticity, play into building trust and a strong culture with your team?
Such a good question. Such a good question, because I think that when we're starting with ourselves and we're really honest with ourselves around, like you were talking about, and you said so well about how we're showing up, and really recognizing that, the best that I have to give is from a place where I'm not withholding my truth, where I'm not afraid of revealing, my truth in some way. And I think when it comes to, authenticity and how we then, especially in HR, but when we can break down those walls and we can release that attachment to feeling as though we need to, kind of be whatever, we think we need to be in certain situations, and instead say, you know what, I'm having a hard time with this, or, I'm having difficulty getting this out and communicating this, starting to like get more comfortable. And this is something that really I'm a little behind you are in terms of like some of the coaching skills that you have, but it is truly like only today, I think it came up for me. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 different times where I was able to use my skills to slow myself down. Recognize where I'm kind of potentially like maybe holding on or whatever, and then be able to like really lean into, the situation in much more of a powerful way, because I am completely as myself without feeling as though I need to be any different than I am in that very moment in order to best serve the situation. And that is like a complete mind change that's come up for me. And again, it's not something that's come intuitively. It's not anything that I learned in school. It's something that I've had to like learn over the course of, you know, several years, but really in the last few years in particular, to understand how our minds work. And you and I have talked about this before. It's too bad I can't put something on the screen to like talk and show everybody when it comes down to really recognizing, you know, when we're feeling ourselves not comfortable with being able to share that truth, whatever that might be that's within us, that is such a good opportunity to be able to like check in and find out why we might be having that resistance. And I think that that's, you know, for me, when that came up 4 different times today, I can do that rather quickly now. But as you know,
Yes.
when you're first starting to like learn these skills, I had to actually sit down on a piece of paper and say, okay, my thoughts create my emotions, which cause my actions, which create my results, over and over and over again. And now you get to a point where it can happen 4 times. And I'm like, okay, those thoughts are creating this emotion. I'm now
Yep.
finding myself frustrated. I gotta, you know, and so, you know, it's really, I think, starting again, kind of coming this full circle, but it's starting with not bullshitting yourself.
Yep.
You know, it really does. It starts with just really being genuinely honest with yourself. And then from that place, being able to communicate that in however you feel safe and comfortable, but in such a way so that you're not then attaching yourself to something that's really not yours to attach to. But because of the way sometimes we get caught up in a lot of these things and tend to feel as though we can't then really be able to have that honest and truthfulness come through, I think it's a matter of really learning how to reframe it and then getting a little bit better at it and a little bit better at it. That ended up going way down a rabbit hole, but I'm glad it just kind of all came back together.
Well, we're not coming out because we all went with you. That was such a beautiful articulation. And there's so much in there. I mean, I don't even know what to dovetail off of. Where do I even begin with that one? I love it. I love that.
Well, what about you? Like, how do you really be able to say, you know, with your style and build, you know, in order to really kind of get in there with your team and ensure that you've got, you know, a strong culture? How do you, yeah, what works for you?
It's just so funny, you know, you started talking about our thoughts inform our emotions, emotions inform our actions, and those inform our results because of HR Empower Hour today. We're a week behind in HR Empower Hour. Today was about putting out fires, how to shift out of reaction into response. And I quite literally used what you just said. And we had, within the hour, we had 2 women go through, okay, tell me about your sis, tell me about your self-induced shitstorm, walk me through your thoughts, you're feeling, like we did the whole thing. And just like you were saying, the thought work I do all the time. I mean, it is a practice. So when I recognize I'm in a self-induced shitstorm, I reverse engineer it and I say, what do you want? What's the result, the outcome do you want? What do you want? And it stops me dead in my track every single time. And it allows me to get quiet with myself and say, what do you want? What do you want? That not what everybody else wants, how you think you should be showing up with this client, with this one-on-one coaching client, whoever, doesn't matter. I'm like, what do you want? And then how do you need to behave? What do your actions need to be? When you choose those actions, emotionally, how are you going to feel? And then what's an empowering thought? So I kind of have this whole reverse engineering process. It's like what my ethos method's all about. And like you're talking about, like it comes up you're like, it came up 4 times today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do this work because I do it so consistently, just like you do. It's like become a part of my life. I am able to catch myself more often, more quickly when I'm starting to lead with that inauthenticity, because let's be honest, that's all I knew for the first 45 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, do you want to spin out? do you want to go back on drugs for general anxiety disorder? Like, do you want to go down that path, or do you want to just pause for a hot second and really identify, how do you want to show up?
There you go.
And man, I mean, it is, and that just allows for me to get calm and get quiet and think about the situation, because every situation is different, right? Like today's customer service workshop, it was fun, it was engaging. So I got to come out as my fun and engaging self. That's not always the case if I'm dealing with, I don't know, the opposite situation. So for me, it just allows me the time to pause and think and say, who do you want to be right now? And that alone just allows me to decide. And it's not about being inauthentic. It's like, who are you? And do you want that version of yourself to come out? And the answer for me is always yes. Because when I truly do, let my light shine, so to speak, no matter if it's a really tough conversation or a really fun and lighthearted conversation, it is just 100% of the time received better. And I know that quantitatively, but also qualitatively. Like it just feels different. Feels good.
Yeah. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Totally. I mean, when you think about, it's kind of a similar question, but I'm curious in what ways you actually foster an environment where others feel empowered to embrace or express their own authentic style. So a little bit less about us. Like, what do you do to help bring out other people's authenticity or encourage that authenticity?
Yeah.
Or do you? I'm being very presumptuous.
No, I got something. So I got to go to a conference really recently, and I saw a gentleman speak at the conference. His name's Jay Golden, and he wrote a book called Retellable. And the book is about the power of storytelling.
Oh, man.
And what it talks about is when it comes to being able to influence, when it comes to being able to serve, when it comes to being able to like have an impact on others to, then find ways to help motivate and influence and all of those things, and the power of storytelling to be able to do that. So I've never, honestly, I've never seen myself as a great storyteller. I grew up when I was younger, and I had other people around me who were the good storytellers, and I would be the one like kind of listening and laughing, but I was never the one who was like the center of attention. That's what I was trying to think of. I just wasn't that person. And I've noticed though, and this is even before I went to this conference, I've noticed though that when there is some, as I've kind of started to learn and practice the skill of storytelling, it's pretty freaking effective, and it's like the more confidence I can build within myself to be able to take my wisdom, to take what I've learned, to take what I understand and turn it into different stories and turn it into different ways to help pass it along in ways where people, because here's the thing that he talked about that was like, boom, that really helped it understand it for me, was really about that sense of I'm not alone. That sense of we're in this together. And and so when you tell stories and when you share stories that specifically are around the challenges and the struggles and the discomfort of others that you work with and those that you serve, that's power. I don't think there's anything more powerful. And that's basically what his point was in the book and in the speech that he gave. And I agree. I think I'm starting to get better and better at that. But here I am at 50, and it's something that I'm having to like learn more at this age. So those out there who are more comfortable in that storytelling persona, keep doing that and find ways to do it. So then that way you can pass on, wisdom, and you can pass on things, because through story, it has a better impact. And, for those who are not so comfortable with it, like myself, and for like others out there, start practicing that skill, little bit here and there, more and more, helps get that more comfortable. And then really recognizing the why behind it, that the stories truly are what can help people in terms of like that connection and that awareness when we're stuck, and that recognizing that connection between others. So yeah, for me, it's kind of a little bit off the rails a little bit, but it works. It really does. And I don't know, has that been your experiences? Have you noticed when it comes down to trying to pass along wisdom, to do it within story is more effective for you?
Oh my God, yes. But I need a definition of storytelling from you first. I want to make sure our listeners know what storytelling is.
Okay, perfect. Good. So a storytelling is setting up some kind of problem, right? So there's going to be something to solve for. There's going to be some context around the problem that needs to be solved. There's going to be an effort. There's going to be a strategy. There's going to be some sort of push and struggle to solve that problem. And then there's going to be a conclusion. And I'm probably getting some of it.
No, I love this. This is so helpful for me. I'm such a details person. Keep going.
Yeah, I have to get the book specifically, but you basically are, you're setting up the stage, you're setting up the problem, you have the struggle, then you have the initiative and the intention, and then you have what the solution is and what the learnings are, both positive and negative. It's very important whenever possible to like learn from both growth and, failure. So yeah, I hope that helps.
It totally helps. And so storytelling for you, is it tapping into your authentic story and your authentic journey and sharing that and being vulnerable?
Exactly.
Okay. And that's how you encourage other people to be authentic.
Yep. Yes. Thank you for wrapping
No. Well, I just wanted to make sure, because so to answer your question, I do speaking engagements, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. I was just at the Tennessee Sherm conference a couple weeks ago. And my story that I shared about my narrative of why I thought I was stupid until I turned 46. And I went into all the details about having a speech impediment, about being diagnosed with a learning disability, about my sister going to Vanderbilt, my brother going to Johns Hopkins on a full ride, like just all of these ultra smart people around me, and how I, at some point, inauthentically decided I was not smart. And once I saw that story for what it was, speaking of storytelling, a little ironic, but once I saw that narrative for what it was, I was like, but there's so much evidence that I'm actually really smart and that I love human beings. So when I shared that story, the room was silent. And this is truly how people were looking at me. I mean, the people, you're right, love stories, and it's a skill. It really is. And I love that you went there. I was not expecting you to say storytelling. I love that you said storytelling. And I think that is a beautiful way to say, I'm human too. And when we open up, because this happened in my customer service training today, it wasn't me being vulnerable necessarily, because I was leading a workshop, and one of the women in the workshop started telling a story about her worst. I mean, I asked the question, I teed it up, her worst customer service experience. And she went into detail, and we use that as an example, blah, 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 blah. Really, really impactful, to the point. At the end of the workshop I was leading, I asked if people got good stuff out of today, if they learned something, and everyone was like, yeah. And this one woman raised her hand. I was like, yeah. She's like, I don't feel alone. I don't feel alone anymore. I work for a small retail shop. I thought I was the only one who felt this way about shaming myself, wishing I could do things differently when it comes to customer service, and just kind of this blame game and not understanding, because of course I go into the human brain. That's another technique I use so that people don't feel shame. I'm like, that's just your amygdala. It's being judgmental. It's okay. I'm going to help you tap into your prefrontal cortex and start moving forward. Right. And I explain the human brain, and people are like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. My brain's just doing what it's supposed to do to keep me safe. And there's a different way to show up that is still authentic. And it's actually like the most evolved, the best version of ourselves. I mean, I have the coolest job. So to dovetail off what you said, yes, whether it's like my storytelling that is super effective when I am in a speaking environment, but also facilitating those conversations and asking the question and inviting that vulnerability and inviting that storytelling amongst other people in the workplace. Because sometimes, you know, if something's coming from HR, sometimes it's perceived a certain way, sometimes it's not. But when you start going like sprinkling those, you know, those high cues, those questions in and getting people from different departments to start talking, or in today's case, different organizations, people really felt that sense of community, like, oh my God, I'm not alone and we're in this together. It was so cool. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. Storytelling. And it's not even that hard to pull out that storytelling from other people. Give me an example of a time when blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And people love to be heard. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And people really love to, you know, it's such a powerful thing to feel as though you belong, you know, to feel not alone. And I think that deserves to like be resaid again, because I think so many of us suffer in silence. And so to then have that hand that goes out, that, you know, whether the story is a little vulnerable or, you know, has, you know, that humility to it, just that it's true, you know, that it's like, hey, I understand. And I think that just goes a long, long way, even if, you know, we're not practiced in the skills of storytelling. Just do this, you know, just put it out there and have that truth out there. And people really, really respond to that because of exactly what you said and, you know, what I'm saying as well. And it's just a matter of saying, hey, if I really want to help others and encourage others to be their most authentic selves, you got to live it. And part of living it, I think, is then sharing and saying, hey, I stumbled flat on my face as well. Let me tell you about it.
But the art of storytelling, like you shared, is like there was a problem to solve and here's how I got over it. And just sharing that success. I mean, as opposed to, now here's an interesting thing I didn't think we'd go to today, but instead of the bitching and moaning, because that could come, like, it was the worst time of my life. And I went through this in HR, 2007, 2008, Great Recession. I laid off 110 people and it was horrible. And my drinking went right. And what I didn't finish in that storytelling, the art of it, like there was a big problem to solve. And ultimately, it really led for a truly cohesive, tight-knit work environment for the people who remained at the organization. We went from 210 to 52. And sure, there were times when people were like, well, is my head on the chopping block next? But we engaged differently to say, as far as we didn't lie, as far as we know right now, things are good. So that's the part I didn't do, Jen, that you do so well because you understand the art of storytelling, right? So kudos to you for pointing that out because I stopped short of my story. So there you go. I don't know.
One last little piece to add about it is, I don't know, are you familiar with the book The Alchemist?
Girl. Paul, I'm not always learning disability. Paul Cleo?
I think so. Yeah, I read it several years ago. But anyway,
yes.
The idea behind, and this is what, you know, I had heard in the book about storytelling, is you always want to have some form of reference to that hero's journey, right? And so part of the storytelling process is like, yes, it's hard. Yes, it hurts. Yeah, you know, like really being able to, you know, show that part of that journey is going to be, you know, all of these things. But then, like you said, being able to show that progression forward and knowing that it really is in the process of not giving up. And that's really, I think, the power of that storytelling. But again, like it comes back to that authenticity for myself. And I wonder if I would have ever been anywhere near as good at being able to start doing this in the way that I am if I wasn't in a place in my life where I am gut checking honestly, right? Am I really truly showing up as my honest self right now? And if something is triggering me to like, check in with that before I feel like I'm presenting something that's not going to be fully authentic. So that's part of it too. And I think that too takes, just that time to be able to start to kind of assess and do those gut checks and then continue to speak as authentically as we can.
This is completely not a question. Do you believe that it's kind of talk about nobody coming to save us? We have to save ourselves, so to speak. We have to be our own superheroes. That's a little bit aligned with that book on The Alchemist. Mm-hmm. And then my brain went to Amy Dufresne, who's the current CEO of HRCI, and their whole alchemizing HR webinar series, which I think is a really cool title, very aligned with what you just shared. Do you think if we're being authentic, oh boy, I'm like, talk about going down a rabbit hole. If we're being authentic, do we really need to save ourselves? Because we have finally reached the point where we're leading with authenticity. There's no one to save because we have found it almost. We just get to be who we truly are. What do you think of that? Did I just go way too deep?
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yes, there is a certain amount of saving, ourselves by shedding what isn't authentically true for you, and for me. And so part of that can manifest in a lot of different ways, but I think that shedding process is going to come out in different ways of, is this truly true for me? And if so, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to shift this in order to be able to show up differently? And that in and of itself can be a huge process for somebody who's really in the thick of it, whether it's in your work life, your home life, your family life, your social life. Like that's a really hard reality to get to a place in your life where you're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm really actually being honest in this area around some things that I've really been, kind of suppressing for some time. And so, it truly is that process, but it has to begin with kind of that shedding of what isn't true for us. And I think that, in my kind of coaching experience, one of the things that I've learned in terms of how to help people when they first are trying to kind of figure out who they are and, the purpose and all of that is like really starting with being able to kind of shed what's not working, what's not, what doesn't quite feel authentically true. And then, rebuilding from that place. I think I answered your question. I ended up kind of going
totally. I mean, I went way off into left field, and I love that. It's the very first step, and I think this naturally happens with the brain. We're so clear on what we don't want, so then we shed it. And it's interesting you bring that up because I'm always encouraging my clients to think about what you do want. But you just said something that really hit me differently than it ever has before, that there's value in knowing what you don't want because you can then shed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of times, because it's almost like this added extra weight, right? And so the way that you can look at it is, we're trying to kind of build on and we're trying to grow and we, have these dreams and desires, but yet you almost got these, these weights that are hanging on to us because we're not yet comfortable or confident in releasing those things that we deep down, again, this gets back to the first couple of minutes, deep down, if it's really not working and it's holding you back and it's, you're really struggling with something, that doesn't quite work, for you, or you're just not feeling confident enough to be able to speak it, speak truth to it. And so, that's an individual journey in so many ways. And I would encourage anybody who might be stuck in that place, whether it's at work or home or whatever, to make sure that, you've got that support. We're probably getting into that question, but that support and trying to kind of help flush that out. Because again, starting with what I do want or what I don't want, either way, it's going to be a process of identification of the authentic self.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I messed up a couple of questions, so I'm going to go rogue again. Like, as an HR expert, what is our role? I mean, is it our role to help people do that shedding? And if so, what is our role? Like, what's an appropriate role? Because like you said, it starts getting to people you trust to have those honest conversations to say, you know, help me figure out what I need to shed and how I need to shed. I think that's what I just heard you say. Did I hear that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe that that's sort of HR's role in some way to help people do that shedding, so to speak, and to help hold the mirror up for employees? Or is that something that's really done outside of work, or is it an and? I'm so curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an and. And I think that there are opportunities that are everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
But I really, truly believe, I think that there's like a caveat, or there's like but be careful, you know, because when it comes to wanting to flush out for others what we haven't really done the work on ourselves, this is like almost a trigger warning thing that I don't do a lot. I don't do often, but it really is something that I think is important for anybody to know, that if our goal, you know, if there's a desire to want to help others in our workspace, which is amazing, right? It's amazing to want to help others in our workspace be their most authentic and truest selves. But if that self-work, that inner work is just messy as fuck, you know, if it's really not really there and they're really struggling with their own house, you know, being in order, that's, I think, where I really, and that's, I think, what drove me to alcohol almost more than anything else, is I was, you know, I would try to do training programs, and I tried to do development. I tried to do coaching with managers, and yet my own house was not in order. And so, you know, it's really some truth to that I had to learn the hard way. Is until, you know, you can truly have that solidified within yourself, and then you can give from that place, like you said a little bit earlier, and I believe that without a shadow of a doubt, around how rewarding that is for you in your role to be able to do that, because the house is in order. Right. And then from where you're giving, from that most authentic place, it's like sparks fly. You know, it truly is. It can be almost magical, because you know deep down that you're not holding back. There's nothing that you're, you know, afraid to release because of fear of judgment or fear of rejection or whatever. Right. And so, I think that that's a huge, huge thing. And so as an expert, I would just say proceed with caution. That's my expert opinion.
I think that's super important, because as I reflect back on, I mean, I almost feel like I had a brain transplant, and I call it brain rehab, what I went through between the ages of 45 and where I am now at 49 is proceed with caution, because I was a very unhappy, anxious person, both in HR and outside. I didn't understand I had victim mentality. I didn't understand how I impacted other people with my constant bitching and moaning and complaining. I was so unhappy at work, and I escaped through alcohol in all the ways. And once I realized my life didn't have to be that way, and I figure out how to get out of that unhappiness, going back to like, I just want to be in happiness all the time, because I truly am happy. And I have absolutely lost some people in my life, and even my professional life, because there are people who don't want to be around happy people. And I am okay with that. Like, unless I'm dealing with a termination, no, truly. I mean, it's literally ever present in my life. And I had to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I had to say, you know what? I want to let my light shine, and I want to be around people who also want to be in that light, and they don't judge me and put me down. And I have a lot of empathy for people who are like, I don't want to look at that light, because I was that person. And I am okay with really showing up differently especially in the HR space. And I'm okay with it because I'm happier, and it just sort of attracts other happier people into my life.
Yeah. It's going to attract the people who are most meant to be around you, and it's going to repel those who never were. Right. And so it's not easy, but it's your truth. And I can relate to that so
I know
hard.
you can.
So yeah, I think that's beautiful. And whether that, for anyone listening or watching, whether that's your happy self, whether that's your serious, it doesn't matter what it is, you will attract and you will repel when that truth comes out. And it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, that's fair.
it's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
But good for you.
Well, I can't imagine once I had that realization that I'd been living in a straitjacket and I was so uncomfortable, and it led to serious health complications for me.
Yeah.
If I wanted to live, I mean, for even just a couple more years, because it won't get too depressing here. I had to get rid of the straitjacket for my own health.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't try to be this person that I wasn't naturally anymore. And it was so freeing. And you're right. It's a change for other people. At least in my case it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no regrets. I can't, because I'm just happy.
Yeah.
When you've already given some advice for our listeners, do you have any other advice that you'd like to impart when it comes to leading authentically and fostering that work environment of authentic leadership? Any advice?
Yeah, I think, we were going in that direction just now, that as you were talking, it just really had my mind going about how, and the answer I was going to give is not quite the same, but it's in a good way, because really, to be able to help others really understand that the journey of becoming our authentic self is going to be so beautiful, is going to be just such a beautiful adventure to try to figure that out. But it's also going to come with those potential consequences around those who may not appreciate that truth. And, having that happen to myself by family members, that's such a hard reality to face. And then to be able to say within myself, but it's my truth. Right. And I think that that's really where you were at, and what really gave me chills, because at the end of the day, people will always try to tell you who you are. And there will always be perceptions and judgments and opinions that are going to try to shake you and move you, because exactly like you said, I'm not really comfortable with that happiness all the time. Can you dial that down a bit?
Right.
Can you just bring that down a couple notches? And within you, you're like, but that's not true for me. Right. And so the reality is, every person has to kind of navigate their own way around what that means for those relationships. Do you want to suppress then your truth based on then those perceptions and expectations of others? Or do you now, do we recognize that people pleasing aspect that is essentially killing you, killing me, right?
Yeah.
And causing me to not fully take care of myself, because now I'm trying to do these actions in order to keep other people appeased. And so it's a massive, I think, undertaking overall, and what this actually means for someone's life. And for me, I know what it really truly meant for my entire identity. And that is, when you really think about being, what it means to be authentic, that is your identity. That's my identity. And finding that place and then solidifying it as, my truth of who I am as a person. What a neat journey. What a neat journey that is. But it does require bracing, and it requires recognizing that it's going to come with the the aftermath that is going to be humbling, and it's going to, yeah, it'll forever change some of the relationships that we have. And ultimately, that is, as much as it's not fun, and ideal, and it's uncomfortable, it's truly, I think, for the best to
Yep.
make that journey. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think the advice really comes down to finding the support networks, solidifying in your truth, and then recognizing to make any sort of concessions on any way, on what that truth is only going to be a disservice to yourself and anybody else, even if it doesn't seem that way, right? Because I'm now making you happier that I've toned myself down, so to speak. It's
Right.
really ultimately not going to be of service to anybody.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are your thoughts, and what kind of advice can you impart?
Well, excuse me. I know you and I have talked about this a lot on this podcast, and I just want to reiterate it for our listeners that you and I have both been very honest about how we used to do old school HR, meaning a lot of judgment, a lot of telling, a lot of like policy enforcement. And just to really drive these points home for our listeners. So for me now, my authentic self, if I am doing a quote unquote PIP, I'm not doing it as a gotcha, because a gotcha doesn't feel good to me. I don't want to gotcha anyone in this life. Like that felt so disingenuous to who I am as a human being.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying Susie Sunshine comes up when I'm having a crucial conversation with somebody. I am just showing up differently. And it's what's going on. Here's the behavior I've been seeing.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? Are you okay? Talk to me. And I just show up in that. For me, that's authentic. May not be authentic for anybody, any of our listeners, but I just wanted to give that concrete example of that's what feels good for me now. It's HR education over HR enforcement. It's talking about the intent of the policy versus the black and white way I used to approach policy enforcement in HR. I mean, I was just a different HR person. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong or good or bad. All I'm saying is the way I HR now, it just comes out naturally. I get to show up at work instead of being afraid of a PIP and like, ooh, maybe I'm going to get sued. I don't think that way anymore. I don't come from that fear. I come from like, I want to help you. What's going on? And for me, people just feel it and they know it. And there's no like, oh, I'm going to sue this person, because it just, that doesn't happen, because I'm just showing up as a human with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So right or wrong, good or bad is a moot point when you're showing up as how you just authentically want to come forward. And all I know to be true is that every HR person I've ever met says, I want to help people. I think we can start helping people in a different, evolved way when we are authentic.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Kathy. That was such a good way to kind of tie it in with a bow, because I couldn't agree more. It really makes just such a massive difference. And it's so interesting. And I think you and I both very much agree with this. It's so interesting how much we really, truly didn't know how much of an impact this would make in our lives professionally, in every way.
Yeah.
By kind of making this effort to shed, anything that wasn't true. And, it really then allows that process of engaging in those difficult and uncomfortable conversations to just really be so much more about, how, like you said, how can I help? Yeah. Right. I'm no longer kind of attaching in ways that I think just is natural, but it also, was what was truly holding us back in so many ways.
Jen, as usual, you blew my mind in this episode. You stretched my mind. You make me think differently. And I am forever grateful for that. You open my eyes just a little bit more with every single episode of this podcast we do. Truly, I'm forever grateful. I just sit here going, when you're talking, everything, and today was no exception. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of us.
Thank you. Same goes to you. I mean, and if anyone out there got anything out of this, share this, with your friends, share this with others, because today was powerful stuff. I mean, I got chills more than once on this episode. It's really, really important for everyone to know in HR or outside of HR, don't you think?
Absolutely. And if you know of somebody who just feels like they're in some kind of a straitjacket, absolutely send them this podcast. Inside or outside of HR, Jen, I love that. We're like, let's be inclusive, right? Anyway, Jen, thank you so much. And I just want to remind all of our listeners that every single day is a great day to thrive in and shine in HR. We'll see you guys for next episode.
Bye, everybody.